Good morning. Thanks for tuning in to Local News Live right here on AOC Community Media. We're, of course, on AOC Channel 1, which is Cox 15, LUS Channel 4. You can also listen to our audio on Cypress Street Radio. That's aocinc.org/CS radio. And we're streaming live on our YouTube channel. Just look us up, AOC Community Media. We do this every weekday morning from 9 to 10. We read news from the Acadiana Advocate, local and state news. Normally we have volunteers. Everyone's doing it from their homes right now. So if you're interested in joining us, if you have a home computer with internet connection, you're qualified. We would love to have you be one of our readers. All you do is just send us an email at info@aocinc.org. Let us know you're interested. We'll tell you a little more about it, and we would love to have you as part of the program. Let's get started. We've got a lot of news to cover this morning. We'll start with some local news. Pellerin family to view police footage. Judge dismisses restraining order. An article by Ben Myers. A temporary restraining order blocking the release of information concerning the Lafayette police killing of 31-year-old Trayford Pellerin was dismissed Tuesday, clearing the way for Pellerin's family to see body camera footage of the August 21st shooting. Judge David Smith of the 15th Judicial District issued the restraining order September the 8th at the request of lawyers representing 3 unidentified officers. They requested the order after Lafayette Parish Mayor-President Josh Guillory agreed to allow Pellerin's family to see body camera footage with identifying images of the officers blurred out. After arguing strenuously in open court that the Pellerin family did not have a right to see the footage, one of the officers' lawyers, Allison Prejean, emerged from a private conference and agreed to the dismissal without explanation. The 3 officers are subjects of a Louisiana State Police homicide investigation, and Prejean had argued that Guillory's allowance of limited access to footage for Pellerin's family was possibly bordering on interfering with the investigation. It also created a Pandora's box for other pending cases, she said. If it's good for one, it's good for all, Prejean said, meaning evidence in all open homicide cases could become eligible for disclosure if Guillory's agreement with the family were allowed to proceed. A lawyer for the Guillory administration, Stephen Oates, agreed with Prejean that state law exempts public records such as body camera footage from disclosure when they are part of a criminal investigation. But the exemption is not the same as a mandatory restriction, he said, and Guillory, as the ultimate custodian of the records, has the discretion to share the records with whomever he pleases. He believes it's the right thing to do, and there's nothing that prevents him from doing it, Oates said. It is not clear what occurred in the private conference that prompted the officers' lawyers to relent. Those representing Lafayette Consolidated Government, as well as the officers, left without speaking to reporters. The Pellerin family, Lafayette Consolidated Government, and several media companies, including the Acadiana Advocate, petitioned the court to allow access to the body cam video and to unseal the record in the injunction. Smith lifted the seal. The Pellerin family's lawyers argued public access would not impair investigations or civil litigation. No litigation has been filed to date. Discovery would regardless be necessary before a civil suit could be filed, and release of the information would not alter or impair the evidence itself, maintaining the integrity of law enforcement's investigation. After the hearing, the Pellerin family's lawyers said they understand the footage is being prepared for the family's viewing, but no date has been scheduled. Once that occurs, they may have additional demands or take other civil action depending on what the footage shows, they said. Once we are able to process what actually happened to Trayford, at that point we will pivot and then move forward. Is this the end of it? Absolutely not, said lawyer Chase Trickell. We are not entirely certain what that will look like going forward. We will make that determination once we see the video. Guillory's spokesman, Jamie Angel, said he was not immediately sure when the viewing will occur. Pellerin died August 21st after Lafayette police officers opened fire while he walked away from them and toward a convenience store, armed with a knife, officials have said. Earlier attempts to stop him using a stun gun didn't work, according to police, though an independent autopsy commissioned by the family found no signs he had been struck with a stun gun. Officers had pursued him on foot for half a mile after receiving a call about a man with a knife at another convenience store on Evangeline Thruway. The shooting was captured on cell phone video and shared on social media. In a meeting with the Pellerin family September 4th, Guillory said he would allow the family privately to view police body camera footage from the shooting, according to Ronald Haley, a lawyer for the Pellerin family. Guillory sent a letter to District Attorney Keith Stutz' office September the 8th, informing Stutz of his intent to let the family view the footage, according to a news release distributed by Angel. Mayor-President Guillory is committed to honoring the promise he made to the Pellerin family and has directed city parish attorneys to advocate for the accommodation of a private viewing for the family of the footage at a hearing scheduled, a statement from Guillory's office said. All right, we're going to go to the next story here. Nominations are open for Lafayette Civic Cup. The Humanitarian Award is in its 87th year. Nominations for the 87th Annual Civic Cup Award opened Sunday. The award honors a person who has accomplished an outstanding humanitarian or civic deed or good deeds benefiting the Lafayette community. The nominee must not have received payment for the deed, and it must not have been done in the regular line of duty. The honoree will be selected from nominations submitted by the public and chosen by an anonymous committee made up of past Civic Cup Award recipients. The nominations are open through October 4th at www.cfacadiana.org/Civic Cup. Since 1933, the Lafayette Civic Cup has been awarded to an outstanding individual who has given their time and resources to improve the Lafayette community through philanthropy. The first recipient was Lafayette Mardi Gras and Oil Center founder Maurice Hyman, and other recipients through the years have included Edith Garland Dupree, Greg Davis, and Jewel Lowe. Last year's winner was business executive Jerry K. Gregg. He was honored during a November 12th banquet at the Petroleum Club. Known for successful careers in energy, healthcare, technology, process improvement, and operations, Gregg is a past chairman of the board of the Greater Lafayette Chamber of Commerce, now one Acadiana, and previously served as vice chair of finance and operations. He has served as chairperson of the board and campaign chair for United Way of Acadiana, as chairperson of the board of St. Thomas More Catholic High School, and as chairperson of the Lafayette Parish School System Technology Peer Review Team. He was named STM Supporter of the Year. Excuse me. We'll move on to the next story this morning. Like starting from scratch, Pat's Downtown reopens after the coronavirus nearly claimed restaurant and owner's parents. This is an article by Megan Wyatt. For Patrick Dupuis, preparing to reopen his downtown Lafayette restaurant after a 6-month closure felt like starting another business from scratch. Dupuis didn't know in mid-March, when he closed Pat's Downtown, 107 East Main Street, that he wouldn't reopen the plate lunch destination until mid-September. He never imagined, in the interim, that the coronavirus would threaten not only his livelihood, but also the lives of his parents. It was horrible. It felt like I would be closed forever, Dupuis said, and then Daddy went in the hospital with COVID, and Mama went in the next morning. It was a miracle they came out, just a blessing. When they were going in there, we didn't think they were coming out again. Against all odds, Dupuis welcomed customers back into the restaurant Monday with his 82-year-old father at his side. Dale Dupuis was admitted on June 26th to Lafayette General Medical Center. His wife, Janelle, would be admitted the next day. She really didn't think she was coming back, said their daughter, Toni Castile. When I told my mom I was calling the ambulance, she said, no, give me a little while. And what she said and what she was doing was getting her papers in order, everything in order. She told me that when she got back. She says, Toni, I didn't think I was coming back. Castile, Dupuis, and their 5 siblings struggled, knowing both of their parents were in the hospital, and there was little they could do to comfort them. Normally, their close-knit family would ensure someone was by their bedsides around the clock. Instead, they relied on hospital staff to provide updates and connect them via video calls because of visitation restrictions. Janelle Dupuis turned 82 during her hospital stay, and her team at Lafayette General surprised her with a birthday cake, videoing in her 7 children so they could sing to her with the doctors and nurses. That was so amazing for the family, Castile said, and we didn't ask them to do that. They did it by themselves. The COVID floor at Lafayette General was amazing to our family. Janelle Dupuis was discharged 3 days later on July the 8th after a week and a half in the hospital. Her husband stayed a few weeks more. Both Janelle and Dale Dupuis were at high risk for complications of the coronavirus because of their ages and underlying medical conditions. She has a chronic lung condition and he has a history of heart disease. My mom came home on oxygen and she could not walk, Castile said. She went into the hospital with a walker and she came out in a wheelchair. She was in tremendous pain. Janelle Dupuis has since recovered and begun walking again. Dale Dupuis suffered from pneumonia in both lungs during his hospital stay, and his medical team asked the family for permission to put him on a ventilator. He was ready to give up, Castile said, and, I think a lot of the older people are passing away not really just because of the sickness, but because they can't have their loved ones with them. Ultimately, he recovered. Ultimately, he recovered without a ventilator and was released from the hospital after more than a month. He spent 2 more weeks at a rehabilitation facility before returning home August 7th, just 5 days before his 82nd birthday. Dale and Janelle Dupuis have slowly regained their strength in their Lafayette home with help from their family and a health aide. It was just a bad time, Patrick Dupuis said. My parents almost died of COVID, and then I couldn't even be with my customers and my team downtown. We're kind of like one big family down there. Patrick Dupuis, who opened Pat's 26 years ago and once had a second location on Collie Saloon Road, said this week's experience has been like opening a third location of the restaurant. It's like starting from scratch, Patrick Dupuis said. We had just thrown everything into coolers and canceled all our orders when we closed, and we've had to throw everything out and try to get everything back in here. It's just like a brand new restaurant. We know what to do, but it's just stressful. Patrick Dupuis employs about a dozen people, and he said all of them returned when the restaurant reopened this week. That's another small miracle, Patrick Dupuis said. They've all been pretty faithful. Some of them have been with me for 20 years. He opted to close his restaurant on March 16th when Governor John Bel Edwards ordered restaurants to close their dining rooms to slow the spread of the coronavirus. His restaurant is a go-to for people who work downtown, not for to-go orders and deliveries. He decided last week to reopen Pat's when the governor announced the state would move into Phase 3. The restaurant owner expects more people to return to office environments, bringing more foot traffic back downtown. He's expecting more customers to utilize his restaurant's outdoor seating as coronavirus cases remain high in Acadiana, and he's also created a curbside option for those who prefer takeout. When the courthouse closed and all the Chase Bank employees were working from home, there was no traffic downtown, he said. There was nobody walking around, and now I'm starting to see a little change, and I'm ready to tackle it. I'm very nervous, but I'm ready. Right, in the next story this morning, in the crime blotter, this is Advocate staff reports, Scott police are searching for 2 men in Tuesday's armed robbery. The Scott Police Department searching for 2 men wanted in connection with an armed robbery Tuesday morning at a local convenience store. During their investigation, police said they learned the 2 men were seen entering the store prior to the robbery and then leaving. The 2 then reportedly returned to the store a short time later, dressed in black, to commit the armed robbery. Surveillance cameras show the 2 men at the scene. Anyone with information on the identities of the 2 men or their whereabouts is asked to call the Scott Police Department at 337-889-5104 or Crime Stoppers at 337-232-8477. A man accused of bringing a gun to school. The Jefferson Davis Parish Sheriff's Office said deputies responded Tuesday to a call about a person with a gun at Elton Elementary School. When deputies arrived, they said the suspect, identified as 26-year-old Kevin Dremsky Dupree of Oberlin, had left the school property. Dupree was located at a residence on Noah Street in Elton and arrested. During transport, deputies say Dupree allegedly kicked the back door and window frame of the sheriff's unit and damaged the rear door. Dupree was booked into the parish jail on counts of possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, illegal carry of weapons, simple criminal damage to property, domestic abuse, aggravated assault, and domestic abuse, aggravated assault with child endangerment. A woman arrested on attempted murder. A woman wanted on account of attempted murder in Alexandria was arrested Monday. Members of the U.S. Marshal Service Fugitive Task Force apprehended LaKosha Johnson in Alexandria, Crowley Police Chief Jimmy Broussard told KATC. Johnson was wanted by Crowley police on 5 counts of attempted second-degree murder. Police said Johnson was also being sought by other law enforcement agencies on several unrelated felony warrants. Johnson was extradited back to the Acadia Parish Jail. This investigation is ongoing, and with anyone with additional information is urged to contact the Crowley Police Department at 337-783-1234 or Detective Rashawn Washington at 337-788-4139. Louisiana is behind the U.S. average in census completion. This is an article by Emma Kennedy. As the census, critical to funding distribution for schools, hospitals, and roads, for example, draws to a close amid a pandemic, officials are getting creative in the push to urge Louisiana residents to fill out the paperwork. As of late last week, Louisiana's 2020 census response rate was at 58.6%, well below the national average of 65.5%. Officials have held news conferences and posted on social media urging residents to participate in the census, particularly because Louisiana looked different a decade ago when the census was last taken. In a virtual town hall on the census, State Representative Jason Hughes, a Democrat from New Orleans, said in 2010 the state was still reeling from Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, meaning a lot of longtime residents weren't yet back in their homes. This is really the first time we have a chance to get a more accurate count, and we know our population has rebounded, he said. East Baton Rouge Parish Mayor-President Sharon Weston Broom likened the importance of completing the census to that of voting. When you don't exercise your right to vote, then you minimize the impact you can have, she said. When you don't complete the census form, you impact your future for the next 10 years. She said there were losses in 2010 because of inaccurate representation, such as the state having lost a congressional seat, and at such an important time in history, it's important to get every dollar possible to the state. I can't specifically say everything we lost in 2010, but I can certainly say that now the challenges are greater than ever before, Broom said. We're in a post-COVID environment, in one where equity and inclusion issues about race are some of the dominant things for us in Louisiana and in Baton Rouge specifically. I would say our federal funds are part of the equation towards the solution. While the number of representatives in Congress is often the most prominent speaking point on the census's importance, it also determines dollars going to schools and roads, for example. It's more than political representation. It's also connected to health care, your hospitals, your food security, your children. So making sure folks know all the ways the census is connected is important, said Janae Jameson of the Power Coalition of Equity and Justice, who moderated the virtual panel. Some examples of programs funded with federal dollars determined by census data include the Office of Social Services that helps residents with rent and mortgage assistance or utility bills, Head Start programs, Employ Baton Rouge, which is a program designed to improve the public workforce system for those with barriers to employment, money for homeless shelters and their needs, and neighborhood improvement grants. In smaller areas like the village of French Settlement, for example, the census data could change the municipality's designation from a village to a town if it records about 100 more residents than it had 10 years ago. That could mean increasing the number of representatives on the Board of Aldermen and redistricting. Usually, census takers would be door-knocking in communities, but can't because of coronavirus concerns, so officials have had to get creative to engage residents. East Baton Rouge Parish has started working with faith-based groups and agencies such as the State Department of Health to push residents to fill out census forms. Across the state, some radio stations are holding call-a-thon-type events where listeners can call in and fill out their information over the phone. The Urban League of Louisiana is partnering with the Bayou Classic to drive an RV through neighborhoods in Baton Rouge and New Orleans. The RV is covered in Census promotion as a visual reminder to complete the information. An often cited barrier to completion is concern about immigration or other personal data being used against those who complete the census. For example, if a person has an outstanding warrant, they fear being arrested because they've entered their address and other information. We have to let people know that their information won't be used against them. We have to get people to understand that not filling out the census undermines the accurate population counts in political representation and funding. It's too crucial to our future not to complete it, Broom said. The census is open until September 30th and can be completed online at census.gov or by calling 844-330-2020. Okay, let's take a look here. Our next story this morning is about the hurricane currently in the Gulf. Hurricane Sally has stalled. Hurricane crawls toward the Gulf Coast, threatening historic floods. This is an article by Jay Reeves and Angie Wang of the Associated Press. Hurricane Sally drifted in a slow crawl Tuesday toward the northern Gulf Coast, threatening dangerous storm surge and relentless rainfall that forecasters warned could trigger historic flooding, as the storm was expected to hover in the area long after coming ashore. It's going to be a huge rainmaker, said Phil Klotzbeck, a research scientist and meteorologist at Colorado State University. It's not going to be pretty. The National Hurricane Center expects Sally to remain a Category 1 hurricane with top sustained winds of 80 miles per hour when it makes landfall late Tuesday or early Wednesday. The storm's sluggish pace made it harder to predict exactly where its center will strike, though it was expected to reach land near the Mississippi-Alabama state line. The hurricane's slow movement not only delayed landfall, but also exacerbated the threat of heavy rain and storm surge. Sally remained a dangerous storm Tuesday even after losing power. Its fiercest winds have dropped considerably from a peak of 100 miles per hour on Monday. By late morning Tuesday, hurricane warnings stretched from east of Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, to Navarre, Florida. Rainfall of up to 20 inches was forecast near the coast. There was a chance the storm could also spawn tornadoes and dump isolated rain accumulations of 30 inches. 2 large casino boats broke loose Tuesday from a dock where they were undergoing construction work in Bayou La Battery, Alabama. M.J. Bessarge, who lives near the shipyard, said at least one of the river boats had done considerable damage to the dock. You really want to get them secured because with wind and rain like this, the water is constantly rising, Bessarge said. They could end up anywhere. There's no telling where they could end up. In Orange Beach, Alabama, towering waves crashed ashore Tuesday as Crystal Smith and her young daughter Taylor watched. They drove more than an hour through sheets of rain and whipping wind to take in the sight. It's beautiful. I love it, Crystal Smith said, but they are high. Hardly any of the beach isn't covered. Captain Michael Thomas, an Orange Beach fishing guide, was outside securing boats and making other last-minute preparations. He estimated up to 5 inches of rain had fallen in as many hours. I'm as prepared as I can be, Thomas said. A couple miles away in Gulf Shores, Alabama, waves crashed over the end of the long fishing pier at Gulf State Park. Some roads in the town already were covered with water. Stacy Stewart, a senior specialist with the National Hurricane Center, said Tuesday that people should continue to take the storm seriously because devastating rainfall is expected in large areas. People could drown in the flooding, he said. This is going to be historic flooding along with the historic rainfall, Stewart said. If people live near rivers, small streams, and creeks, they need to evacuate and go somewhere else. Donald Jones, a National Weather Service meteorologist in Louisiana, said Sally could unleash flooding similar to what Hurricane Harvey inflicted in 2017 when it swamped the Houston metropolitan area. As rain grew heavier Tuesday, many businesses appeared to be closed at exits along Interstate 10 that runs parallel to the Gulf Coast from Louisiana to Florida. In Gulfport, Mississippi, white plastic bags hung over some gas station pumps to signal they were out of fuel. Along a bayou that extended inland from the Gulf, 3 shrimp boats were tied up as shrimpers and others tried to protect their boats from waves and storm surge. Most boat slips at Gulfport's marina were empty, and many businesses had metal storm shutters or plywood covering the windows. David Espinoza walked the streets of Pascagoula, Mississippi on Tuesday afternoon, drenched by the rain. He said he wasn't worried much about Sally, having found his pickup truck in a tree after Hurricane Katrina wrecked much of Mississippi's coast in 2005. Espinoza had just moved back to the area a few days ago after a long stint in Oklahoma City. "We just didn't know there would be another hurricane when we got back," Espinoza said. "Here we go again." In Alabama, officials closed the causeway to Dauphin Island and the commuter tunnel that runs beneath the Mobile River. An online video from Dauphin Island showed a few cars and SUVs stuck in a beachfront area, their tires sunk deep into wet sand. Alabama Governor Kay Ivey urged residents near Mobile Bay and low-lying areas near rivers to evacuate if conditions still permitted a safe escape. The National Hurricane Center predicted storm surge along Alabama's coast, including Mobile Bay, could reach 7 feet above ground. "This is not worth risking your life," Ivey said during a news conference Tuesday. The storm was moving at only 2 miles per hour Tuesday afternoon, centered about 105 miles south of Mobile, Alabama, and 60 miles east of the mouth of the Mississippi River. Hurricane-force winds stretched 45 miles from its center. Forecasters expected Sally to move slowly northward Tuesday, with the storm's center bypassing the coast of southeastern Louisiana. After making landfall, Sally was forecast to cause flash floods and minor to moderate river flooding across inland portions of Mississippi, Alabama, northern Georgia, and the western Carolinas through the rest of the week. President Donald Trump issued emergency declarations for parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama on Monday and tweeted that residents should listen to state and local leaders. The threat to Louisiana was easing as officials in some areas reversed evacuation orders that had been issued for areas that had been feared to be at risk of flooding from Sally. In New Orleans, government offices and public school operations were slated to reopen Wednesday. Governor John Bel Edwards said Tuesday he is thankful Sally will largely slide east of Louisiana after days of anxious planning for the storm, especially after Hurricane Laura wreaked havoc on southwestern Louisiana 2 weeks ago. "The primary concern that we have now is flooding in low-lying areas in extreme southeast Louisiana because of storm surge," the governor said. Edwards said Monday he had spoken with Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves and to Ivey on Tuesday about the storm and told them Louisiana would be offering assistance. "Obviously, what is good for us is not good for our neighbors," Edwards said. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis declared an emergency in 13 counties as rain from Sally's outer bands pummeled the Panhandle on Tuesday. On the barrier island of Pensacola Beach, Florida, the Sandshaker Lounge was open Tuesday afternoon, filled with about 30 locals and tourists staying at nearby hotels. "I think I'm the only business open," said bartender Kira Smith. "It's pretty windy, but nobody's being knocked down. We want everybody to be safe." Smith was serving hot dogs and pizza and planned to close late Tuesday afternoon or when the bridge to the mainland closed, whichever comes first. She said most locals have lived in the area for decades and have weathered many storms bigger than Sally. "We're just going to ride it out," she said. All right, we got more news here for you. I'm just going to grab a sip of water here and we'll move on. All right, another local news. Comedian asks court to dismiss suit over fake Antifa events. This is an article by Megan Wyatt. John Merrifield, the comedian who's being sued over fake Antifa events in Lafayette that prompted a real police response, is asking the court to strike the lawsuit. Attorney Andrew Beiser, who is representing Merrifield, on Tuesday filed a special motion to strike the lawsuit in 15th Judicial District Court. Beiser called the lawsuit frivolous and unconstitutional. and petitioned the court to dismiss it under a Louisiana law that protects speakers and publishers against malicious or meritless lawsuits that arise to infringe on a person's right of petition or free speech. As a form of satire and political commentary, Mr. Merrifield created two overtly ridiculous Facebook events that are covered by the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, Beiser wrote in the court document. The respective descriptions of the fake events were written in a satirical and hyperbolic manner. Lafayette Parish Mayor-President Josh Guillory announced 2 weeks ago that the city parish government was suing Merrifield for hoaxes that have cost taxpayers a considerable amount as law enforcement investigated and responded to both. In the lawsuit filed August 31st, the city parish is seeking an unspecified amount from Merrifield for damages of less than $75,000. Lafayette's lawsuit is long on the facts but short on the law, Beiser wrote in a Tuesday morning news release. Beiser said there are multiple problems with the lawsuit, including the city parish citing a criminal law that doesn't apply because Merrifield is being sued in civil court for monetary damages. Any first-year law student could tell that this is a frivolous lawsuit filed solely to suppress Mr. Merrifield's constitutionally protected speech, Beiser said in a prepared statement. You can't sue someone for money damages and only cite theories of negligence and a criminal statute. That's not how it works. Mayor Guillory and the lawyers he hired know this and yet still had the audacity to file it. We are confident that the court will agree. Merrifield, 29, had two reasons for creating the events, according to Tuesday's filing. The first was to raise awareness over society's increasing reliance on social media for news and information, and the second was to bring attention to the disparate police response to a call for a peaceful rally of people whom the police have decided are problematic. Mr. Merrifield's attempts to spark public dialogue worked, Beiser wrote in his motion. Many individuals in the Lafayette area believed that the fake peaceful political events were real. The Lafayette City Parish Consolidated Government investigated and determined that the events were a hoax. Despite learning of the fake nature of the events, Lafayette deployed an overwhelming police presence to sit in empty parking lots. Maryville's first satirical event, Antifa Takes River Ranch, was posted in July, before protests against police brutality and racial inequality hit so close to home. The fake event had its intended effect by prompting a counter-protest event by the Right Side Millennial, according to the city's lawsuit. Even after Lafayette's leaders debunked the July event, the hoax continued to be believed and spread, the lawsuit states, so the city parish government was forced to take responsive action to protect people and property out of fear that armed protesters and Antifa-inspired agitators would appear. Antifa, short for anti-fascists, is an umbrella description to the far left-leaning militant groups that resist neo-Nazis and white supremacists at demonstrations and other events. Maryville created another fake event, Antifa Takes Acadiana Mall, in August. The mall closed early the day the event was scheduled to happen, and more than 30 police units were in the parking lot at the start time for the Facebook event. We will always take these threats seriously, Guillory said during a radio segment the week he filed the lawsuit. But we're not just going to respond and say, okay, thank you, let us pay all this overtime from the taxpayers. Heck no. We will stop at no cost, or we will stop at no measure to recoup the cost that taxpayers have to pay for this kind of stuff. When Merrifield learned of the lawsuit earlier this month, he said the police response to his satirical events demonstrated Guillory's priorities to protect the city's more affluent south side over the north side. In a Tuesday statement, Merrifield took another crack at Guillory's tenure as mayor-president. The city of Lafayette and Mayor-President Guillory are understandably embarrassed after taking a fake event posted by a comedy page seriously twice, Maryville wrote. However, what LCG and Mr. Guillory should really be ashamed of is how they closed their doors to our neighbors seeking hurricane relief, how they attempted to defund recreation centers in poor communities, how multiple LPD officers couldn't detain one man without shooting him in the back, couldn't respond peacefully to those protesting Trayford Pellerin's murder, and couldn't detain a teen without assaulting him while two officers held him down. If anything, the excessive responses to the fake events posted by my meme page are just more examples in a long list of excessive responses. Be better. Right, it's 9:35. It's about the halfway mark in our program this morning. We're going to take a short break from news stories. We still have a few state news stories on the way, but first we'll take a look at today in history, the zodiac, and first the funerals today in the Acadiana area. Harold Ashley at David Funeral Home Chapel in New Iberia at 5:45 p.m. today. Armand Brinkhouse Jr. at Melanson Funeral Home of Grand Coteau at 2 p.m. this afternoon, and Mildred Champagne at St. Anne Catholic Church at 1 p.m. today. Today is, of course, Wednesday, September the 16th. It's the 260th day of 2020. There are 106 days left in the year. Today's highlight in history: on September 16, 1974, President Gerald R. Ford announced a conditional amnesty program for Vietnam War deserters and draft evaders. On this date in 1630, the Massachusetts village of Shawmut changed its name to Boston. In 1810, Mexico began its revolt against Spanish rule. In 1966, the Metropolitan Opera officially opened its new opera house at New York's Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts with the world premiere of Samuel Barber's Antony and Cleopatra. On this day in 1982, the massacre of between 1,200 and 1,400 Palestinian men, women, and children at the hands of Israeli allied Christian Phalange militiamen began in West Beirut's Sabra and Shatila refugee camps. In 1987, 24 countries signed the Montreal Protocol, a treaty designed to save the Earth's ozone layer by calling on nations to reduce emissions of harmful chemicals by the year 2000. In 1994, a federal jury in Anchorage, Alaska, ordered Exxon Corp to pay $5 billion in punitive damages for the 1989 Exxon Valdez oil spill. The U.S. Supreme Court later reduced that amount to $507.5 million. Also in 1994, 2 astronauts from the Space Shuttle Discovery went on the first untethered spacewalk in 10 years. In 2001, President George W. Bush, speaking on the South Lawn of the White House, said there was no question Osama bin Laden and his followers were the prime suspects in the September 11th attacks. Bush pledged the government would find them, get them running, and hunt them down. On this day in 2005, President George W. Bush ruled out raising taxes to pay the massive costs of Gulf Coast reconstruction in the wake of Hurricane Katrina, saying other government spending had to be cut to pay for the recovery effort. In 2007, O.J. Simpson was arrested in the alleged armed robbery of sports memorabilia collectors in Las Vegas. Simpson was later convicted of kidnapping and armed robbery and sentenced to 9 to 33 years in prison. He was released in 2017. In 2014, President Barack Obama declared that the Ebola epidemic in West Africa could threaten security around the world and ordered 3,000 U.S. troops to the region in emergency aid muscle. 10 years ago today, Pope Benedict XVI began a controversial state visit to Britain, acknowledging the Catholic Church had failed to act decisively or quickly enough to deal with priests who raped and molested children. 5 years ago, baton-wielding Hungarian riot police unleashed tear gas and water cannons against hundreds of migrants after they broke through a razor wire fence and tried to surge into the country from Serbia. 1 year ago today, more than 49,000 members of the United Auto Workers went on strike against General Motors, bringing more than 50 factories and parts warehouses to a standstill. The strike ended after 40 days when workers ratified a new contract. Today's birthdays: actor Janice Page is 98 today. Actor George Chakiris is 88. Bluesman Billy Boy Arnold is 85 today. Musician Kenny Jones of Small Faces and The Who turns 72. Actor Susan Rutten is 72 as well today. Rock musician Ron Blair of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, as well as Mudcrutch, also 72. Actor-comedian Lenny Clark is 67 today. Actor Mickey Rourke turned 68. Magician David Copperfield is 64. Actor Jane Brooke turns 60 today. Singer Richard Marx turns 57. Comedian Molly Shannon is 56. And singer Mark Anthony is 52. We'll take a look now at our zodiac for today. Virgo, stop worrying about what others do and focus on what you want. A physical change should be put on hold until you research the possibilities further. Focus on practical matters and on getting ahead. Libra, quiet time will help you sort through uncertainty. Relive some of the moments that haunt you, and you'll discover you are putting too much blame on yourself. Let go of the past, and you'll find the path that leads to happiness. Scorpio, size up situations and prepare to take action. Change is heading your way, and you want to be prepared to take advantage of whatever opportunity comes along. Sagittarius, think twice before you share your thoughts with others. Someone will misinterpret what you say and meddle in your personal affairs if you aren't careful. Capricorn, you can wheel and deal all you want. You are in a prime position to advance as long as you don't let your intellect clash with your intuition. Don't overreact or overanalyze. Aquarius, look for alternative options and do your research before heading down an unfamiliar path. If you are uncertain, sit tight until things become clearer. Love who you are. Pisces, an emotional situation will cause you to change direction. Your feelings will be close to the surface and will lead to a place that feels right. Let go of the past and follow your dreams. Aries, take a moment to digest what's happening around you before deciding to jump into the mix. A reserved approach will put you in a much better position. Look at the big picture. Taurus, a change doesn't have to be drastic, but it should be practical. Refuse to let your emotions ruin a good thing. Truth matters if you want long-lasting results. Follow your heart. Gemini, a situation will not be as it appears. Don't act on an assumption. Channel your energy into personal gain, growth, and physical well-being. Be observant, not aggressive. Cancer, concentrate on partnerships and how you can contribute as a team player. Don't be fooled by someone with big yet impractical ideas. And lastly, Leo, look over your objectives carefully and make adjustments before sharing your ideas. You must do your best to gain all the support you can get. Romance is on the rise. The horoscope, of course, is an entertainment feature not based on scientific fact. Okay, let's move on. We've got more state news and some sports on the way. It's 9:42. Black Caucus seeks probe into Ochsner's hospice practices, an article by Andrea Gallo. Louisiana's Legislative Black Caucus has called on Governor John Bel Edwards and the Louisiana Department of Health to investigate how the state's largest hospital system handled coronavirus surges this spring. The caucus laid out its concerns in a letter to Edwards after the nonprofit newsroom ProPublica published a story September the 2nd that said Ochsner Health System was out of step with hospitals across the nation for sending coronavirus patients whom doctors considered terminal home to die this spring. ProPublica reported that in other cities that were coronavirus hotspots at the beginning of the pandemic, most patients died in hospital-like settings, largely because of concerns the virus would spread if the patients were sent home. ProPublica also reported that of the dozens of families reporters interviewed about their loved ones dying at home with the coronavirus, all of those who said that Ochsner pressured them into accepting home hospice care were Black. That group consisted of relatives of 8 patients. The story examined deaths in Orleans Parish over the first few months of the pandemic. In the city, 75% of those who died were Black. In the letter to the governor, Black Caucus representatives said they'd received a rush of phone calls to their offices after the ProPublica story came out, and the Acadiana Advocate published a story citing ProPublica's reporting. Many people normally do not question medical practitioners because they feel they are right with their prognosis, diagnosis, and decisions they share with the patients, states the letter. But after reading this article and because of observations throughout the years, we are asking you, Governor Edwards, to have the Louisiana Department of Health and the COVID-19 Health Equity Task Force launch a full investigation to answer these and any other questions that would be critical to the subject. A spokeswoman for Edwards, Christina Stevens, said Tuesday that the Department of Health is reviewing a complaint about some of the concerns presented. She said the governor's office is aware of the concerns and plans to respond to the letter from the Black Caucus soon. The letter includes 12 questions that the elected officials are asking Edwards' office to probe. Among them, how many medical providers sent patients home to die on hospice, how many families consented to do not resuscitate orders, and how many families were given personal protective equipment to care for their loved ones at home. Ochsner has defended its practices throughout the pandemic, telling ProPublica that it never cut corners on patient care, that its hospitals never triaged or rationed ventilators, and that it never issued any so-called DNRs without the consent of a patient or a legally authorized representative. In a new statement Tuesday, Ochsner officials cited the data they shared with the New England Journal of Medicine about the racial demographics of their coronavirus patients this spring. A resulting study said that Black patients had higher prevalences of factors that increased the odds of having a bad outcome from the virus, such as diabetes and obesity. But the study also said that patients being Black was not independently associated with higher mortality. In Ochsner's hospitals between March 1st and April 11th, 77% of 1,382 coronavirus patients were Black, according to the hospital's data. Officials said 17 Black patients chose to receive hospice care, as did 14 white patients. Of the 1,382 patients, 46% of those who had a DNR were white and 27% of those with a DNR were Black, Ochsner said. In a recent interview with this newspaper, Chief Medical Officer Dr. Robert Hart said he was disappointed that ProPublica's story placed such emphasis on race. Chief Nursing Officer Tracy Moffitt also said the decisions to send home coronavirus patients on hospice care had positive effects in some cases. She said some palliative care patients rebounded at home, thanks to the presence of friends and family members. Hospital rules at the time, which were in place at most, if not all, hospitals in the area, forbade visitors this spring because of concerns about the virus spreading. In other state news, Laura caused more agricultural damage in Louisiana than Katrina and Rita combined. Hurricane's toll estimated at $1.6 billion. Hurricane Laura caused an estimated $1.6 billion in damage to Louisiana crops and forests, easily topping the $1.5 billion inflicted by Hurricanes Katrina and Rita in 2005. The 2005 hurricanes also included fisheries damage, which hasn't been tallied from Laura and will increase its figures, according to the LSU Agricultural Center. The storm did $1.1 billion in damage to the Louisiana timber industry and $525.4 million to Louisiana farmers. Laura devastated 757,538 acres of timber from the southwest to northeast parts of the state, according to a report by Ag Center economist Kurt Guidry and forestry specialist Michael Blazier. The losses caused by the storm are expected to increase once the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries releases damage estimates for the fisheries industry. Guidry said Laura will end up being one of the costliest storms ever for Louisiana agriculture. Based on the amount of infrastructure damage that occurred and the losses associated with timber, the total economic impact to the food and fiber sector from Hurricane Laura will be as large as or larger than any storm that I have developed estimates for since my time with the Ag Center, he said. From a timber standpoint, Blazier said, Laura appears to be the most devastating storm to hit Louisiana, even more destructive than Katrina and Rita combined. It's demoralizing. I checked and rechecked the figures, and if anything, it's conservative, he said. Using data from aerial surveys by the Louisiana Department of Agriculture and Forestry, Vernon Parish was estimated to have the largest economic loss of timber at $360 million on 160,416 acres, followed by Rapides, Beauregard, Grant, and Allen parishes, all estimated to have timber damage exceeding $100 million. The heaviest damage tracked the path of the storm's eye as it went almost all the way to Arkansas as a hurricane. Anecdotal evidence suggests the worst damage occurred in forests that had been thinned recently. There was just one more wind that could come through those stands, Blazer said. In addition, the report said Laura will have long-term effects on the timber industry, with increased debris resulting in more disease and insect pressure on surviving timber. Also, the debris will worsen the potential for wildfire outbreaks and increase the cost of establishing new tree growth. The state's rice crop suffered most, the report said, with 74,000 acres affected for an economic impact of $28.5 million. The sugarcane crop is expected to take a 3.2% hit in yield, a loss of 50 million pounds, valued at $8.2 million. In other Hurricane Laura news, the judge says fairgrounds must take in horses, as many as 500 Calcasieu racehorses displaced to New Orleans by Hurricane Laura. This is an article by John Zimmerman. As many as 500 racehorses left scattered across the state after Hurricane Laura tore up the stall area at Delta Downs Racetrack in Calcasieu Parish will be relocated with their caretakers to live and train at Fairgrounds Racecourse in New Orleans under a judge's order. The move has been delayed, however, until after Hurricane Sally runs its course, said Charles Gardner III, executive director of the Louisiana Racing Commission. Gardner confirmed that Orleans Parish Civil District Judge Sidney Cates IV on Friday sided with the commission and the association that represents Louisiana horsemen. Cates ruled that Churchill Downs, Inc., the owner of the fairgrounds, must abide by the commission's emergency September 3rd order to accept the displaced horses. The company had balked at a request from officials at Delta Downs, owned by Nevada-based Boyd Gaming, to put up the horses and their caretakers at the fairgrounds after Laura struck. The Louisiana Horsemen's Benevolent and Protective Association asked the Racing Commission, which regulates racing at Louisiana's 4 tracks, to step in with an emergency order. The commission voted 9-1 to grant it, but Churchill Downs filed for a temporary restraining order to halt the enforcement. The company cited the dangers of COVID-19 in New Orleans and the risk of housing horses in the city during the height of hurricane season. Cates dissolved the restraining order on Friday, agreeing with the commission could force Churchill Downs to take in the horses. Gardner said on Monday that the parties are negotiating payment to Churchill Downs for expenses that include preparing the barns and the racetrack in the off-season. Gardner said relocating the horses would not wait on a deal, however. Things should start to move pretty quickly, at least to get the horses in after Sally passes, Gardner said. As long as the racehorses can get the shelter, they can work out the details. Also, news about horses. 3 horses have been sickened with encephalitis in South Louisiana, an article by Yusef Radad. 3 horses tested positive recently for a potentially deadly mosquito-borne illness in southern Louisiana, raising concerns from state officials about the increasing number of mosquitoes due to recent warm and wet weather. The Louisiana Department of Agriculture and Forestry said Tuesday a horse in Iberville Parish and 2 in Lafourche Parish recently tested positive for eastern equine encephalitis, an illness spread from mosquitoes that can sicken humans and other animals too. Officials said the recent bout of humid and hot weather throughout the state has led to more mosquitoes in areas and has increased the risk of animals contracting diseases they spread. Mosquitoes are out in force right now, Agriculture and Forestry Commissioner Mike Strain said in a statement Tuesday. The hot and wet conditions, exacerbated by storms such as Hurricane Laura, increased the number of mosquitoes that could be carrying diseases. He urged horse owners to vaccinate their animals to prevent them from getting sick. Encephalitis is transmitted from mosquitoes to other animals, including those in the horse family, such as donkeys and mules. In horses, symptoms often include fever, loss of appetite, weakness, loss of coordination, and circling, all of which can sometimes lead to death. In rare cases, humans can develop similar symptoms that are also life-threatening, and they are less protected because no vaccine exists for people, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Only about 5% of people who contract encephalitis get sick, but children under 13 and older adults appear to be more vulnerable to the virus. Birds carry the illness and pass it to mosquitoes, who go on to bite other animals and spread the disease, similar to other ailments like West Nile virus, dengue fever, and malaria. The latest CDC figures show 38 people contracted encephalitis in 2019, just 2 fewer than the past 7 years combined. 2 human cases have been confirmed in Louisiana since 2010, with the highest concentration of cases in upper Midwestern and Northeastern states. Several southwestern Louisiana parishes started aerial spraying for mosquitoes to stamp out mosquito hotbeds in marshes and other areas following Laura's landfall, the LSU Ag Center said last week. The action followed reports of thick clouds of mosquitoes in hurricane-stricken parishes and numerous livestock deaths caused by the insect bites. Agriculture and forestry, as well as numerous local mosquito abatement agencies, said people can reduce the risk of contracting mosquito-borne illness by dumping out standing pools of water where the insects breed. People should also use mosquito repellents, wear pants and long sleeves, and avoid the outdoors at dusk and dawn when mosquitoes are most active. Okay, we've run out of time for our sports story this morning, but it was recognition of UL's Gardner, UL senior linebacker Farid Gardner, being named as the Walter Camp National Defensive Player of the Week after Saturday's win over Iowa State in an impressive feat. That's all the time we have for our news this morning. This is Local News Live, stories from the Acadiana Advocate, local and state news, of course, led by volunteers. If you would like to volunteer to read for the program, send us an email at info@aocinc.org, and we'll let you know about the program and get you started. We would love to have you as part of the program. Join us here every weekday at 9 o'clock on AOC Channel 1. This is Cox 15, LUS 3. As well as Cypress Street Radio, aocinc.org/CS Radio, and streaming live on our YouTube channel at AOC Community Media. Thanks for joining us and have a great day.